Understanding the nature of consciousness is one of the most profound inquiries one can embark upon. True comprehension, however, does not arise through intellectual reasoning alone. It must be directly experienced. As the philosopher Plotinus once wrote, the soul must climb from intellect to intuition to truly know the One. Consciousness is not an isolated entity within an individual's mind, but rather an infinite, indivisible field, a singular reality appearing as many. Consider a vast white canvas representing infinite consciousness. Now, imagine this canvas covered with countless undulating lines. These symbolize the movement and vibration of this consciousness. Scattered across the canvas are dotted circles, each representing what we perceive as individual minds. However, these are not truly separate entities, but rather delineated segments within the same boundless field. Our sense perceptions, sight, hearing, touch, taste and smell, form the perforated boundary that creates the illusion of separateness. As the Kybalion states, the all is mind, the universe is mental. Everything perceived, whether as thoughts within or objects outside, is simply the activity of the one mind, filtered through the limitations of finite perception. The human mind, conditioned by its faculties, interprets this unified reality in the form of time, space, and material substance. Yet time and space are not inherent aspects of reality, but rather the result of the mind's structuring of perception. As Kant observed, time and space are not properties of the external world, but frameworks imposed by the mind. If another kind of consciousness, perhaps an alien mind, were configured differently, its perception of reality would vastly differ. Instead of experiencing reality through sight, sound and touch, it might perceive through entirely different faculties, rendering the world unrecognizable by human standards. This echoes William Blake's words. If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man, as it is, infinite. Similarly, consider a two-dimensional being existing on the surface of a lake. This being perceives only forward, backward, and sideways, completely unaware of height or depth. When a branch dips into the water, it perceives not a tree, but shifting lines expanding and contracting. Likewise, the human mind, bounded by its limited faculties, grasps only a fraction of the true nature of existence. Just as a fisherman standing above the lake sees the full picture, a consciousness beyond human constraints might perceive dimensions and realities we cannot even fathom. If a mind existed with the capacity to perceive in 5 or more dimensions, it would effortlessly grasp what is incomprehensible to us, just as a 3-dimensional being understands height, while the 2-dimensional creature remains oblivious. This realization leads to a profound possibility. What if beings we consider angels, extraterrestrials, or spiritual entities are simply forms of consciousness with different perceptual faculties? Throughout history, accounts of divine visions and celestial encounters may stem from moments when the human mind, through altered states, meditation, contemplation, or even psychedelics, temporarily expands its perceptual limits. As Aldous Huxley observed in The Doors of Perception, the brain acts as a reducing valve, filtering an overwhelming reality into a manageable trickle. When this filter loosens, glimpses of a greater reality emerge. In medieval times, mystical experiences were common, often depicted as visions of angels bathed in divine light. These were not mere fabrications, but expressions of a broader perception, enabled by devotion and heightened awareness. The rational mind of today, rigid and analytical, often suppresses such experiences, confining reality to the narrow band of sensory perception. This idea aligns with the observations of various spiritual traditions. Sufism speaks of the unveiling of the veils, where deep meditation and devotion allow one to see beyond the illusory constraints of perception. The Bhagavad Gita states, "The unreal never is, the real never ceases to be. These traditions emphasize that what we perceive as reality is only a fragment of the infinite field of consciousness. When one deeply contemplates the nature of consciousness, a question arises. Is the world we perceive truly external, or is it simply a projection of the mind? This question has fascinated thinkers from Plato, who likened the human experience to shadows on a cave wall, to quantum physicists who assert that the observer plays an active role in shaping reality. Modern research in neuroscience also supports this perspective, suggesting that the brain does not passively receive reality, but constructs it based on sensory input and prior experience. Even scientific inquiry, rooted in objectivity, eventually converges with mystical insight. The famous double-slit experiment in quantum mechanics reveals that particles behave differently depending on whether they are observed, implying that consciousness is not separate from reality, but fundamentally entangled with it. As John Wheeler, a pioneer in quantum theory, put it, the universe does not exist out there independent of us. We are part of a participatory universe. Ultimately, infinite consciousness does not fragment into individual minds. It remains whole, merely appearing as differentiated perspectives. The perceived world is a reflection of the perceiving faculties shaped by the observer's mind. Whether through scientific observation or spiritual insight, the act of perceiving is an act of creation, shaping reality in accordance with the faculties that engage with it. The question then becomes, what lies beyond the limitations of our perception? And how might we expand our awareness to touch the truth of the one mind? The key to realizing this lies in stillness. When the mind is silent, freed from the distractions of sensory input and conceptual thought, one can directly perceive the underlying unity of existence. As the mystic Rumi beautifully stated, silence is the language of God, all else is poor translation. To experience infinite consciousness is to quiet the mind and dissolve the illusion of separation. This is the invitation of every great spiritual tradition, not merely to believe, but to see, to experience, and ultimately to be that which has always been.